Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist Podcast has the goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 107 of the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast, we are spending some time talking about a part of the outdoor industry that we don't usually discuss, at least on this show: RV living and travel. There's been a few episodes that we've done that cover van life and overlanding, but since so many people choose RVs, trailers, and vans as their mode of transit or even as a full-time home, it only makes sense to explore how we can actually do this sustainably. I personally have never lived in a camper trailer or RV, so when I discovered Kristen Sara's and Siya Zarrabi's Hopscotch the Globe brand, I knew I wanted to hear their insights in how to integrate low waste and minimalist living while traveling and living out of their airstream. Kristen and Siya are an adventure-seeking, world-traveling, tiny home living couple behind the Hopscotch the Globe brand. They have one of the top travel channels on YouTube dedicated to travel and adventure. They showcase everything from travel tips and advice, destination guides, tiny house living, beauty and fashion, food adventures, bizarre travel, reviews, and more. In today's episode, they'll share what they've learned in over their decade of travel and how we can all integrate a minimalist mindset, whether we're just on holiday or we choose to live on the road full time. This podcast is sponsored by Diorite Gear. Diorite Gear sells sustainable trekking poles handmade in their Portland, Oregon workshop. By taking ownership of their production, Diorite Gear is also able to minimize their trace in manufacturing and in the environment, while their poles' recyclable and easily repairable components allow you to do the same. As someone that hikes daily and often in the Cascade Mountains or its foothills, trekking poles are a staple in my gear lineup. And the Diorite poles not only have comfortable cork handles, but I love the high level of adjustability, durability, and overall performance, no matter the time of year I happen to be hiking. Use the code MINIMALIST for 10% off your order. Thank you guys for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast today. I'm excited to get to know both of you and hear your perspective on full-time adventure travel living on the road. But before we get to all of that, could you both introduce yourselves and then tell us how you both became involved in outdoor recreation and how it currently fits into your life?
So my name is Kristen Sara, and I have always been an outdoor girl ever since I was little. I loved being outdoors. I spent the summers at my trailer catching frogs and swimming and riding my bike. It's just always been my happy place. And I started really traveling when I was like 18 years old and kind of never stopped ever since. And when it comes to travel, what I seek out is nature and being outdoors and what can I do outdoors in the places that I visit. So that's always kind of like my number one. And 6 years ago, my husband, Siya, and I, we decided to buy a airstream so that we can continue having adventures on the road, spending as much time as possible outdoors in nature, but also having a home base we could take with us. And yeah, we've shaped our lives around being outside and making that a priority for ourselves.
And my name is Siya Zarrabi, and I've been traveling ever since I was like 18, like Kristen. And we've made a living traveling the world, creating video content, writing on the blog and doing photography and really sharing with people how to travel the world. And then now doing it as a family because we have a daughter. And I really gravitated to RV living and kind of life on the road when my family rented an RV for 10 days in Alberta in Canada. Driving through the Rockies, and it was amazing. It really opened my mind to like, you can have a home and you can have adventure all in one, and it's compact and it's fun. And ever since then, I've really wanted to do it. So when Kristen brought up the idea of getting an Airstream, I was on board. I was like, let's do this right away. And
That's
here we are.
awesome. Yeah,
We're
and you're still doing it.
still doing it. We're actually currently, right now, as we're doing this podcast, pulled over on the side of the road by Lake Ontario near Toronto. And it's amazing.
That sounds amazing. I am also curious, since you both are full-time travelers for such a long time, did you guys both meet while you were traveling?
No, we actually met in high school. So we,
Oh,
since we're like 15, 16 years old, and we became best friends. And we had an exchange program in high school that allowed us to separately, we did it. So actually, Sia did it first, and I did it a couple years later, but we got to spend a semester abroad in Paraguay. And I think that also made us very close because Sia went, I was like super curious about it. He inspired me to go and do it 2 years later. And we started dating as soon as we graduated high school that summer. And 6 months later, I left for Paraguay for 4 months, but we kept dating, and it's been 19 years now. So that's how we met. And travel has been a big part of our relationship.
yeah, that's awesome. Good for you guys. And it's so nice when you have a shared passion with your partner and you have been able to build a life and career out of that. And Kristen, you mentioned that it was about like 6 or so years ago that you started living in the Airstream and traveling full time. How were you traveling before that, and what kind of inspired that specific lifestyle change?
We were actually traveling a lot, pretty nonstop. We were probably traveling 3 weeks out of each month for at least 2, 3 years. And by plane, by moped, by train, by kind of like any mode of transportation. But we were like backpacking more so back then, all over. We've been to like 60 plus countries at this point, many multiple times. And then we're kind of getting a little burnt out. But at the same time, if we stopped for like a couple of months, we got that itch like, okay, what are we going to do next? So we're like, what could be a good middle ground? And the idea came into mind, like, what about some sort of vehicle that we can travel and live in? So that's kind of where the spark came from. And we went for it. Like within a month of saying, this could be a cool idea, we had bought an Airstream.
That is a quick turnaround. And why did you choose an Airstream, like a travel trailer, instead of going for kind of what you see online a lot, a camper van?
Really, it was a photograph that really like opened our eyes to the Airstream. It wasn't just that it was a home, but it was beautiful. It was artistic. It was futuristic looking. Like the Airstream is just this iconic vehicle that people of all ages gravitate towards, and it's timeless. So we loved the idea that it was photogenic and it was aesthetically pleasing because we knew it was going to be in our photos and videos, and we loved the idea of it. Also that we could park it and leave it behind and like take a small vehicle or take a smaller vehicle, right? Like we had a truck that pulled it. So we liked the idea that we could park the Airstream, detach, and then drive the truck around rather than just having it all in one, which has its advantages. I mean, we're in a van right now in Toronto and we see the advantage of it, but we wanted the ability to detach.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I kind of hear a lot from people that travel full time and they tow a trailer. They like that they can kind of set up camp or set up their home base and then bop around the area and check things out that maybe wouldn't be as accessible in a van. But if you have a truck, you probably have a little more accessibility to more remote areas, which is awesome. And I do want to kind of back up to when you first got the trailer and kind of what that process was like in your planning and if you did any renovations. So did you first have a new Airstream or did you end up buying a used one? And why did you decide to go either way?
We got a used one. It's a 1976 Airstream, 31 foot. And there was no plan for us to get a newer one. We wanted to get an older one that had history, but we also planned to do like a little bit of renovation. This is at first, which led to fully gutting it, even taking it off the frame, replacing the subfloor, putting it back together and completely like renovating the inside. Because the great thing about Airstreams is like the shell itself, it lasts forever. but the insides don't necessarily last forever if you don't take care of them. So we found that the airstream that we bought as is, it had like, you know, a little bit of mold here, a little bit of that this is broken. And the more that we kind of like took pieces apart, we were like, no, we need to start from scratch. And I'm glad we did, because we completely customized it and made it our own. And it is gorgeous. It's beautiful, and it's us, and it's like it was planned to really like work with our lives. So it was a really great experience. It took about a year in total to like from buying it to renovating it to like living in it, but it was worth it. And the cost was like a third of what a new Airstream would have cost us, and yet it ended up being a new Airstream
Yeah,
in
this
its
is
own
the
way.
after. This is
Yeah.
after all the renovations. It still ended up being about a third the cost of a brand new Airstream. And it was like all up to date. That in, you know, with all modern appliances, with modern technology, like we made it a smart home too, right?
And we use a lot of as much organic material as possible. I did a lot of research on how to be as eco-friendly, as sustainable, organic as possible with like home decor. So from our mattress to our pillows to even our paint, I made paint. So it was a really fun project. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it all turned out.
Yeah, I would love to hear more details about kind of that eco-friendly or like sustainable leaning renovations, and what were some of like the main areas that you were able to have a lower impact during the renovation process.
We upcycled a lot of stuff. So all of our countertops were 100-year-old barnwood from our brother-in-law's barn on his land. And yeah, we have a compost toilet. So it eliminated like our black tank. We implemented a whole solar system so that we could be off grid. And yeah, the other stuff Kristen mentioned, like the paint and a lot of the products we brought in like bamboo and wood products and
Maybe
chemical free, like everything. Like chemical free was a big thing for Kristen. She didn't want any like sort of chemicals. So it's interesting when people walk into the Airstream, they're like, wow, it smells so nice. It smells so earthy. Like
it's because it smelled like the barnwood, and even the cleaning products that we use were all like I made them myself from like the like quote unquote Windex was like witch hazel and essential oils, and I really wanted to make it a really non-toxic environment. So yeah, it felt really good to be inside there. It felt so clean.
And I'm assuming that you have a lot of that process like documented in your videos and on your website and blog and stuff. So if people wanted to check it out, they could probably find it there.
Absolutely. We have everything documented.
I kind of thought so, but just wanted to ask. I'll be sure to link some specific examples of that in the show notes. So if people want to see kind of their renovation process and stuff, you can find it easily there. And since we were talking about the renovation right now anyway, I am curious about the off-grid capabilities. And you mentioned that you did solar. And so why did you decide to integrate that aspect into the renovation?
Yeah, that was a big conscious decision because we knew in this Airstream, we wanted the ability to be generating our own electricity on the road. And we wanted this to be a little home we could take anywhere. And we had it in like the forest in Canada off grid. We had it in the desert in the US off grid. And then we had it in like a little tropical jungle area in Florida off grid. And it was like amazing to have that ability. So we reached out to a Canadian company called Go Power. And they were so excited with what we were doing. And they sponsored a solar system that we installed. And it was 500 watts of solar. And it was a 3,000 watt inverter so that we could run AC and DC in the Airstream. And we installed like a DC fridge, and every single item we like really thought about the wattage, you know, the lighting, the appliances. And I'm really glad we did because it really added a whole like modern element to this old Airstream.
Yeah, what do you think? I mean, is there really an alternative to the off-grid capabilities? Like, had you not done that, what would like a different option be?
So a lot of trailers don't have off-grid capabilities or don't have like backup battery power. And there was so many occasions where we were parked even like at a campground where we were plugged in and the power would go out in the whole campground or the RV park. And we didn't even notice. Like people came knocking on our door like, hey, your site has electricity. And we're like, oh, I didn't even realize, right? Our lights were still running. Our fridge was still on. And it's in those moments that we realize the benefit of it. Because the other option is that you have to be reliant on the grid, right? You have to be plugged in order to get electricity. But what happens when you're not on the grid? And what happens when that grid fails, right? You got no backup. So I think it's really important that, people that want to live this lifestyle, if you are going to adventure out, you need solar, you need backup power.
Yeah, I didn't even think about if for some reason you were in a campground and then the power failed, but that is definite benefit on top of the other benefits. And one thing that we've talked about on the show before, I think a couple of months ago, we had a van life specific episode, and we talked about like general sustainability while you're traveling and how hard that is, because you end up having to buy groceries more often, more packaging, you're using more gas usually to travel from place to place. And so I'm kind of curious how you guys have approached travel to try and minimize your environmental impact, especially when you're living in a small space.
It's hard to say whether this lifestyle has more or less impact. I think overall it has less. But I mean, here in Toronto, I'm seeing, like 100,000 cars sitting in rush hour traffic, wasting gas. And that's not very sustainable. So I think the way that we try and minimize our impact, on top of just like having a smaller house, right? Like it's a 200 square foot house that requires less cleaning, that needs less materials for the people that live in it, right? Think of the amount of flooring that we used in that airstream versus someone that lives in a 3,000 square foot house that's only two people, right? So it's less materials just to exist in and live in. And we try and shop at farmers markets, which don't waste any bags and don't have plastic. We try and be conscious of the products we use. Like even our shower is a low flow shower, so that we get, a spa-like experience in our shower, but it wastes a lot less water. So we try and be conscious of every element of our lives.
And when you're off grid too, you are naturally just more thoughtful with what you're using, because you only have like a certain amount of water in your water tank, and maybe the solar is like going down by the hour, right? And you have to be like, okay, we got to turn off this light then, so we can keep a little bit of juice left for the next day or two. So you're just more mindful overall. And I think that when you're doing that on a regular basis, you just become more mindful in general.
Yeah. And for those who have never lived that way, I mean, we never really had to growing up. We didn't think about that. I'd like to invite you to think about how you use your cell phone when you're at 100% battery and when you're at 5% battery.
Yeah.
That's an easy way to realize the impact you make on your devices or your usage, right? When you're at 5%, you're like, turn off that screen, disable Bluetooth, turn off Wi-Fi. We got to save this power. And that's kind of the mentality when you go into like RV living off grid.
Yeah, that is a great example. I love that. And you kind of mentioned that these weren't necessarily things that you did growing up. So do you think that traveling full time and then moving into the Airstream is what really solidified some of these more sustainable lifestyle choices? Or was that something that was going on over time before you ever moved in?
I think travel has shaped us in so many different ways. So I would probably agree that it definitely inspired us in that area. But I also think just personally, as my relationship with nature has grown, it's just made me be more mindful over the years. Like as I've gotten older, I just have a stronger connection with the natural world. So it just makes me want to do better, so to protect it and just be more mindful of my actions.
Have you found that there are any specific challenges that you guys have run into? They can be related to sustainability or not, but generally, like traveling full time has a lot of benefits and a lot of people really love it. It's not for everyone. So are there specific things that if someone maybe is thinking about doing this lifestyle, what are some aspects that maybe aren't so wonderful?
Compost toilet. Definitely. Yeah, that was like a great idea at the beginning. And it still is the concept of it, but it's a lot of work and it can be a shitty situation sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a struggle. Also, I mean, just the shift in mentality, adjusting to a tiny space, having to kind of dance around each other, owning less stuff, and even minimizing our lives to begin this lifestyle, right? That was challenging. We spent years kind of like accumulating stuff, buying a TV, buying a couch, buying a big bed, buying like all these appliances, and then it doesn't fit in this little space. So like you have to then minimize your life. And that can be hard.
And also really good.
And also really good.
Bittersweet.
Yeah. But I guess there's so many unknowns when you go into this. Like we didn't really know anything about this lifestyle. We tend to just kind of dive right into something and then figure out how to swim. And we didn't know anything about RVs or trailers or where to park or off-grid. We didn't know anything. We had very little like prior experience, and we had to learn everything as we went. So some people might be flustered at not knowing, everything and being experts. We're okay with that. We're comfortable in that state of mind. And now I can confidently say 6 years later, like we're experts. So yeah, that's the fun part, but I could see why it would be frustrating at the beginning.
Yeah, those unknowns, I think, come with a lot of different types of travel, though. So it kind of makes sense that you guys were already set up in a good mindset to approach something that was vastly different from your lifestyle beforehand. Another aspect, like sustainability wise, I know a lot of van lifers, and I know something that they often struggle with when they are on the road is creating community and kind of building meaningful connections. So how have you guys been able to manage doing that?
I think we have built the best connections when we've stayed in like campgrounds or RV parks for, a certain amount of time, whether it's a month or a few months. And because I think you share such a common interest, it's such a big part of your life, I think you just click immediately with certain people. It's the same with when you're traveling and the people you meet when you're traveling. It's like, most of my best friends are from my travels, and it's like became best friends day one just because of that connection with the passion for travel. So I think you form like strong bonds with people easily when you're on the road doing the same things as you, but then you got to say goodbye too. But I mean, then you can meet up again somewhere else. So I think for a lot of people, maybe they're like, oh, I don't want to constantly try to make friends and then say goodbye and do it again. We're kind of used to it at this point. And we do have our core, like we have friends back home too that we see on a regular basis, like where we grew up. So we kind of have like different friend groups within the travel world and then like growing up in that world. So it doesn't really feel like we don't have community, or it's hard for us to like, feel like we're part of community. We kind of have different types of communities wherever we are.
Yeah. And I think for us, it's quality over quantity. Mm-hmm. And when we land somewhere and we bump into someone new, that time that we share with that person could get deep, right? We want to talk about life. We want to talk about this adventure. It's kind of like a podcast that we never recorded, right? With questions. And that to me is valuable, because like how many people live in suburbs and don't know their neighbors? Like you might be living there for 20 years and maybe you know your immediate neighbor, but you might not know 3 houses down, and you literally live like beside that person. So it's really quality over quantity.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like a couple of different ways that people might be able to approach that and maybe make those connections, but do you have any like specific recommendations? Like if that is a big concern for someone that is going into full-time RV or van living or something like that, like, do you think they should just try to stay places longer periods of time, or like seek out certain locations to try and meet people?
I mean, yeah, I think there's different ways to really find your people on the road. There's so many people doing it, especially now, that there's like Facebook groups, there's apps where you can like, meet up with other people. And then of course, campgrounds and RV parks and stuff. Like it's pretty easy to find people who are doing what you're doing and even doing it. Again, you'll find the people that are doing it seasonally or on a weekend. Then you're going to find the full timers as well. And, we've met people that we've continue traveling with. I know a lot of people in the van life world make friends and then they like kind of convoy together and continue the journey together. So there's different ways of finding your people on the road.
I think that there's a stigma with people that live in vans or people that live in RVs or trailers. And when I started, experiencing this lifestyle, the stigma was totally wrong. Like, I don't know what I had in my mind, that these people are going to be just introverted and weren't going to want to make friends. And it was totally wrong. These are the friendliest people I've ever met. Like, I love people that live on the road. There's a sense of adventure in them. There's a sense of, not wanting to stay put, that they want to travel, but they want to have a little home with them too. And I just love everyone we've met. It's been a wonderful experience so far. And I encourage people to like get involved, like talk to your neighbors, go say hi to people, like knock on somebody's door that lives in a van and ask them questions, and get involved in like the community that you're going to be living in. So if you're living in Boston in a van, for example, see if there's like classes you can be involved in, a dance class, a pottery class, like martial arts or something, like, so that it breaks you out of that little world and you get to meet people. And when people find out that you live in a van or an RV, you're going to be the center of attention. You're now the most interesting person in the room.
Yeah, these days it's like seen as like, oh, that's cool, man. Like, whereas I feel like, I don't know how many years ago people would be like, oh, I'm just like, oh, who are you? Now it's like, because it's a symbol of freedom.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. I don't know why I didn't think of this question ahead of time, but I am also just generally curious how it has been raising a family on the road, because your daughter's 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that's what I read. So you didn't have her when you initially left. So how did that kind of impact and change the way you traveled and like just generally your life?
So yeah, actually we found out that I was pregnant while we were living in our airstream in Malibu. And we decided to like make our way back to Canada because that's where I wanted to have her around family. And because Canada, I wanted to have my daughter there for, several reasons. And we, like, as soon as she was 1, we moved back into the airstream and continued our journey. But we also re-renovated it to make it more space for her. She has her own like little bunk in there. She has her own little place for her clothing, her toys, so that she had her, her area while we were on the road. And it's been great because, I mean, raising a little kid on the road, being outdoors the majority of the day, getting to experience so many different places and people and activities. It's amazing, especially when they're so young.
Yeah, she really thrived on our road trips. And then when we landed somewhere for like a few months, actually in Florida for a few months, and then she could actually make like friends that would come to the trailer and like knock on our door and want to hang out, and they'd come and visit and she would visit them. That's when I saw a big change in her too, because she was meeting other kids that were also on a journey like this. And there are so many parents doing this, especially in the last like 3 years, when like schools got shut down and parents like just didn't know what to do with their kids. International travel had stopped and so many people diverted to RV living and van life. And I think kids love it. Like, it's a little fort on wheels and it takes them places and they can use their imagination. And I think it's a beautiful way to raise a family, to grow up.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly sounds like a dream childhood. So that's amazing. I love to hear that there are so many parents opting for that, because I mean, I don't have children, so I don't often think of that, but I have been seeing a lot more families on the road. So it is interesting to note that. And moving forward, I'm assuming you guys are going to continue traveling. So do you think you'll stay in the Airstream for quite some time, or do you have any specific adventures planned?
Oh, wow. The Airstream has not come to a close, although we have taken it off the road. So the Airstream is from 1976, 45 years old, and you never see a 45-year-old Airstream on the road anymore. Generally, the ones you see are from like the 90s, 2000s, or like brand new. And we didn't want our Airstream to get damaged at all because we love it so much. But we still wanted like community and we still wanted to live in it. So we bought land in Costa Rica, nowhere near Canada, decided to ship the Airstream to Costa Rica. And we just had a huge, beautiful structure built. And the airstream is going to be parked in this structure and basically act as the bedroom. And we have an outdoor kitchen, a shower, a laundry room, and all this stuff for the airstream so that we can continue to live in the airstream and then step out onto this like beautiful deck with an amazing view of mountains and the jungle with like monkeys and toucans and parrots. And that's where the airstream is going to be parked for the rest of its life.
It's actually an eco community too, so it seems very fitting. And we're going to have solar for the structure. And yeah, it's a very exciting project. And it feels like, yeah, exactly where our airstream is meant to live the rest of its life.
Yeah. How did you decide that is kind of the landing spot or like the home base?
We fell in love with Costa Rica like years ago and just kind of had a feeling that we were going to live there. And then like fast forward to a few years ago and we went back, and we've been wanting to, like, for years, live in community. Like that was one of our big goals. We wanted to live in like an intentional community. And on that trip in Costa Rica, we found out about one, and it just everything kind of aligned. It's a little bit of a longer story than that, but everything kind of aligned. We decided we wanted Costa Rica to be home base. So we bought land and decided to ship the airstream there and then build a spot for it.
Well, I can't wait to see how all of that develops. And then once you guys finally move in and start living in that eco community. And if listeners want to follow along with your journey or check out any of your old travel and renovation content, how can they do that?
They can find us on YouTube. They can type in Kristen and Siya. They can also find us hopscotchtheglobe.com or Hopscotch the Globe on all the other social channels.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. I'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes so people can check that out there. But with that, I guess I'll just say thank you again because I already said it before I said the other thing. Dang it.
Yeah. And I think one last thing is our adventure on the road does not come to a close. So now that the airstream isn't on the road anymore, we're looking at either getting a short bus or a van to renovate and continue our journey here in North America.
Yeah, so the plan is to spend, a certain amount of time in Costa Rica during the year, then come back to North America, explore in our new home on wheels, and then all of the in-between hopping around other countries.
Oh, is that why you're testing out the van right now? Or did you just kind of want a change of pace?
I mean, yes, and also just for fun, but we're testing out, okay, how can we do this in a van, or do we need something a little bit bigger? Because we have a dog as well, so 4 of us in here can be a little tight, but we also see the benefits. So we're going to have to outweigh the pros and cons.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad you guys will continue to travel.
Yeah, us too.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.